A 20-cent light bulb killed 101 people. Say that back to yourself. Not a hurricane, not a bomb, not some catastrophic engine failure ripped straight out of a nightmare. A light bulb, the kind you'd find in a desk lamp, the kind you'd toss in the trash without a second thought. And it happened to the most advanced aircraft in the sky. December 29th, 1972. Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a brand new Lockheed L-1011 TriStar delivered just 4 months earlier, state-of-the-art, practically fresh off the assembly line. This was the future of flying. And on a clear night, with no storm, no mechanical failure, no terrorist, no bomb, it flew itself directly into the Florida Everglades at 227 miles per hour. How does that even happen? How does a plane with 3 trained professionals in the cockpit, flying one of the safest aircraft ever built, just quietly descend into a swamp while nobody notices? That's the question. And the answer is going to make you furious, because it's so small, so avoidable, so strikingly human that it almost doesn't feel real. Listen closely. This is the story of Flight 401, the crash that never should have happened, and the ghost story it accidentally created. Here's what actually happened that night. Flight 401 left New York, heading to Miami, carrying 163 passengers and a crew of 13. Routine flight, nothing unusual. As the plane approached Miami International Airport, the crew lowered the landing gear, like they'd done 1,000 times before. But this time, something didn't look right. The green indicator light, the one that confirms the nose gear is locked and ready, didn't come on. No green light, just darkness where there should have been confirmation. So what do you do when a 20-cent bulb doesn't light up? You investigate. That's protocol. That's smart. Nobody's wrong for checking. Captain Robert Loft made the call. Abort the landing, circle back over the Everglades, climb to 2,000 feet, and figure out the gear situation before trying again. Sound reasonable? It was. This is where the story should have ended with a delayed landing and an annoyed announcement to passengers about a mechanical delay. Instead, it became one of the deadliest crashes in American aviation history. So how does a routine gear check turn into a national tragedy? Subscribe now, because the next few minutes will show you exactly how it unravels. Captain Loft engaged the autopilot and set it to hold at 2,000 feet. That's the safety net. That's what autopilot is for. It flies the plane while the humans solve the smaller problem in front of them. Flight engineer Don Repo climbed down into a compartment below the cockpit to check the landing gear manually. Captain Loft and First Officer Bert Stockstill focused entirely on that stuck light bulb, trying to remove it, twist it, replace it. 3 grown men, 1 tiny bulb, all of their attention pouring into a 50-cent piece of glass and filament. And somewhere in that struggle, somebody's knee, somebody's elbow, nobody knows exactly whose, bumped the control column, just slightly, just enough. That bump disengaged the altitude hold function on the autopilot. The plane was no longer being told to stay at 2,000 feet. It was free to descend, quietly, gradually, without a single alarm bell going off in anyone's head, because everyone's eyes were locked on a light bulb, instead of the instruments in front of them. Consider that for a second. The safety mechanism designed to catch human error, the autopilot, got turned off by human error. That's not irony. That's tragedy waiting to happen. The descent was gradual. Not a dive, not a plummet. A slow, steady slide toward the swamp below, so gentle that nobody in the cockpit felt it in their gut, the way you'd expect. The plane began losing altitude, foot by foot, while 3 experienced professionals stayed buried in a maintenance problem that, in the grand scheme of flight safety, barely mattered. There were warnings. There's always warnings. A subtle chime sounded in the cockpit, a signal built specifically to alert the crew that the plane had dropped 250 feet below its assigned altitude. It rang out, and it got missed, completely missed, buried under the noise of 3 voices arguing over a light socket. Radar controllers on the ground noticed the plane's altitude dropping and radioed the cockpit, asking if everything was okay. Loft responded that everything was fine. He believed it. That's the part that hurts. He wasn't lying. He really had no idea his aircraft, carrying 176 people, was quietly falling out of the sky. Seconds later, flight engineer Don Repo, still working below near the landing gear, apparently spotted something wrong through a small viewport and reportedly said something about their altitude. It didn't register in time. The plane hit the Everglades at 227 miles per hour at 11:42 p.m., on a night with no storm, no fog, no reason for anyone below to expect disaster. 99 people died in that swamp, either in the impact or in the chaos immediately after. 2 more would later die from their injuries in the hospital, bringing the final toll to 101. 101 lives, gone because of a 50-cent bulb and a bumped control column nobody even remembers touching. Surprisingly, 75 people survived. 75 human beings walked, crawled, or were pulled out of a wrecked fuselage sitting in the middle of an alligator-infested swamp at night, miles from any road. Robert Marquise, a local frog hunter, saw the fireball light up the horizon from his airboat. He didn't wait for instructions. He didn't wait for permission. He gunned his boat straight toward the wreckage and spent the entire night pulling survivors out of the muck, working through the smell of jet fuel and the screams of the injured, suffering severe chemical burns to his own skin in the process. Nobody trained him for this. Nobody paid him for this. He just went. Inside the wreckage, flight attendant Beverly Raposa woke up in complete darkness, disoriented, surrounded by twisted metal and the overwhelming stench of spilled jet fuel. And in that moment, with everything falling apart around her, she didn't panic into silence. She screamed out to anyone who could hear her, "If you can hear my voice, don't light a match!" Read that again. A woman just survived a plane crash into a swamp, and her first instinct wasn't to save herself. It was to stop a spark from turning that wreckage into an inferno. That's not a job description. That's raw human courage, delivered in 11 words, in total darkness, in a place that smelled like death and jet fuel. If that story hit you the way it hit us, tap like right now. It really helps this get shown to more people who need to hear it. Rescue crews eventually reached the site, but Marquise and a handful of other airboat operators had already been working for hours before official help arrived. In a swamp that dark, in water that deep, minutes mattered more than anything else. Ordinary people showed up when it counted most. 6 months later, in June of 1973, the National Transportation Safety Board released its final report. And the conclusion was almost insulting in its simplicity. The crash happened because the flight crew failed to monitor their instruments while distracted by a burnt-out landing gear light. That's it. That's the whole explanation. 3 trained professionals, a state-of-the-art aircraft, and 101 lives lost, all traced back to a bulb worth less than a cup of coffee. Beyond the report and the memorial, this crash rewrote how cockpits operate to this day. Because of Flight 401, the aviation industry developed what's now called crew resource management, a system that trains every single person in the cockpit to speak up immediately when something feels wrong, no matter their rank, no matter who's in charge. Before this crash, a junior officer might hesitate to challenge a senior captain. After this crash, that hesitation became unacceptable. Every commercial flight you've ever taken since the 1970s has been shaped, in some way, by the lessons pulled out of that Everglades swamp. Really, think about that the next time you fly. That safety briefing you tune out? It exists partly because of Flight 401. Soon after, the narrative took an unexpected turn. In 1973, a Flight Safety Foundation newsletter published a lighthearted line, a joke really, about a pilot supposedly seeing the ghost of Don Repo, the flight engineer who died trying to fix that landing gear. It was meant as dark humor between aviation professionals. Nothing more. But that joke escaped its container. It spread. And by 1976, author John G. Fuller had turned it into an entire book called The Ghost of Flight 401, claiming crew members and passengers on other Eastern Airlines planes had seen the apparitions of Captain Loft and Don Repo appearing in cockpits and cabins, warning pilots about fires, staring blankly at instrument panels. The book became a sensation. It fed a legend that persists to this day. The claim that Eastern Airlines quietly salvaged usable parts from the wrecked TriStar and installed them in other aircraft, and that the spirits of the dead crew followed those parts onto new planes, haunting whichever jet carried a piece of Flight 401's fuselage. Yet, no official record proves that ever happened. None. FAA mechanics and aviation historians have pushed back on this claim for decades, pointing out there's zero documentation of salvaged Flight 401 parts being installed anywhere. It's an urban legend, a brilliant one, a haunting one, but a legend born from a single joke in a safety newsletter that got wildly out of hand. And isn't that almost more disturbing than an actual ghost story? A tragedy involving 101 real deaths got turned into a spooky campfire tale. And somewhere along the way, the real victims real people with real names, became side characters in their own tragedy. Robert Loft, Don Repo, real men, real families, reduced to props in a paperback thriller. Eastern Airlines never recovered its reputation the way it needed to. The airline limped through the following decades, weighed down by financial struggles, labor disputes, and a public image problem that a ghost story certainly didn't help. By January of 1991, Eastern Airlines shut its doors permanently. Gone. An airline that once dominated American skies, finished. Was Flight 401 solely responsible for that collapse? No. Aviation deregulation, brutal competition, and mounting debt did most of the damage. But you can't separate a company's public trust from stories like a haunted airplane fleet circulating for nearly 2 decades. That kind of narrative sticks to a brand, whether it's true or not. For 50 years, the real story of Flight 401 sat overshadowed by ghost sightings and paperback horror. The 75 survivors. Robert Marquis and his airboat. Beverly Raposa's scream in the dark. Don Repo, who died trying to fix a problem that never should have needed fixing in the first place. All of it buried under decades of supernatural fascination. On December 29th, 2022, 50 years to the day after the crash, survivors and family members gathered in Miami Springs, Florida, to unveil a permanent memorial monument on Curtis Parkway. The Flight 401 Memorial Group raised $600,000 to make it happen. Not for a ghost story, for the people. For the 101 who died, and for the 75 who somehow lived to tell about it. That monument exists because ordinary families refused to let their loved ones be remembered as a punchline in a horror book. They fought for half a century to bring the real story back to the surface, the story of a light bulb, a bumped control column, a frog hunter with an airboat, and a flight attendant who screamed into the darkness to save strangers she couldn't even see. So next time somebody brings up the haunted plane of Eastern Airlines, you'll know the real answer. There's no ghost, no salvaged fuselage, no spirit riding along in cockpit number 3. There's just a 50-cent bulb, 3 distracted men, and a swamp that swallowed a plane in under a minute. 101 people never came home. 75 people got a second chance at life because of strangers who refused to stand still. And an entire industry changed the way pilots talk to each other forever. Because somebody finally admitted the truth. Silence, distraction, and 3 good people staring at the wrong thing. At exactly the wrong moment brought that plane down, not a ghost. If this story stuck with you, like it and subscribe, because there's always another forgotten truth worth digging back up.